Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of Tetzeli Talks. I'm your host slash talk facilitator, Kevin A. Gregg, and who are you?
Hi, I'm Helena Tetzeli, as you well know, Kevin Gregg.
I know, but the people need to know
I know.
who we need. There are certain formalities in this, Helena.
You're so formal. I know.
I am. We are both partners at the firm Kurzban, Tetzeli, and Pratt. And this episode, this program, as hopefully people know by now, uses Helena's 25 plus years of experience in immigration law to navigate through some of the ever evolving trends and updates that shape immigration law and immigration policy. Each month, we're delving into new complex issues and developments in immigration law. And this month, we're talking all about parole and its various iterations, because parole is what's on top of everyone's mind, in addition to the election, which also is linked to parole. Isn't that right?
Unfortunately, yeah, I think it will be linked to parole. Although there
Every
was a development, there was a big development that I guess we can start off with to parole, a development that many of our listeners will consider negative, um, even without a change in administration.
right.
So the Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, Venezuela parole program, which I think started, I think Venezuela got this special carve out parole in fall 2022, and then it was expanded to Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti in 2023. Um, is apparently going to end. It's going to be allowed to expire. And I think that was something that I didn't expect
Right.
necessarily from this administration. Um, because while I don't think most immigration lawyers are thrilled with the way the immigration system has been handled under the current administration, uh, I I was surprised to see this very kind of immigration friendly program expire under this administration. And
It
so that
seems
leaves open the question that you and I have kind of discussed internally. What are these people going to do when these programs do end? And one note, the Ukraine parole program for you has not been affected, as far as we know, that individuals here under you for you parole are able to continue re-paroling, so to speak, and coming into the US on parole if they haven't yet been
yeah.
sponsored for
Just
you
to,
for your
just
parole. This is
to,
these four countries. Yeah.
to take a step back, these parole programs, the four countries we're talking about now, Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Venezuela, the Biden administration permitted certain nationals, citizens of those countries, to be paroled into the United States, which means they come in here legally. They don't really have a status except they've been allowed to come in temporarily. They had to have sponsors. They had to be, financially sponsored, financially independent. They would get work authorization. And the reason is that those four countries, I believe they're not doing great. A
They're
lot of the
not doing
nationals,
great.
a lot of
And
those nationals are
Cuba's
coming to.
actually, well, the reason, yes, is that these countries, I think it depends on the country. Some of them are doing worse than others. Nicaragua arguably is not, suffering the same infrastructure and political issue problems to the same degree as Haiti, for example, or
Yeah.
Cuba or even Venezuela. I think we have to take another step back as to the reasons. The reasons, I think, were to control what was at least perceived to be the uncontrolled flow of immigration and asylum seekers at the southern border by creating this path, a legal path, a more thought out, well planned out, considered path for individuals from some of these countries. And it was individuals from these countries that were, comprised
Yeah.
large part of the inflow from the southern border. And it has served that purpose. So we know from statistics that are published by the administration that the numbers have gone down for other reasons too. But one reason was this kind of safety valve was created, which is this another example of like how our immigration system, is functioning based on, bandages, kind of temporary emergency stopgaps. But for whatever reason, this parole program was the administration was touting it as working, as serving its intended purpose, because the number of encounters at the southern border since these programs were instituted has gone down markedly. So that's another reason I thought it was a little surprising that they decided to end them. And in addition, as we know, some of these programs, I mean, this is similar to TPS, and so these programs tend to be, re-designated, reauthorized unless conditions in these countries markedly improve, and they don't tend to markedly improve in any of these countries, as you know, from Sujet litigation in Haiti, and that was Haiti TPS. But so not sure what the logic is behind ending them now, but that does leave a lot of people, I don't know the numbers, but hundreds of thousands probably, of people who are here, who are from Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, who are here now with permission to work. And in a year and a half, a year, whenever, their current parole status expires, what's going to happen? Where are they going to go? Are they going to stay? Are they going to go underground? Are they going to leave? Are there options for them, Kevin? So
That was going to be my question. I mean, to your knowledge, have conditions in Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Venezuela gotten a lot better? But that's a rhetorical question. I think we know they haven't. And parole's important, right? Because it gives you, it's just the first step. First of all, America tracks these people, unlike if they're smuggled in at a port of entry. And again, we know that they're being sponsored, but parole's important legally, right? Because maybe it's required to adjust to a green card status if you get
exactly.
another ability. I mean, why else is parole important?
Well, you're able to work,
Right.
obviously. But let's circle back to this question of the benefits of parole status. So one of the benefits, as you mentioned, is it may qualify someone or help qualify you, meet one of the elements that is required to adjust status here, get a green card in the US. So, and the simplest example of that is the Cuban Adjustment Act. So under the Cuban Adjustment Act, if someone has either been inspected and admitted or paroled, and they meet other requirements, they're a citizen of Cuba, have been here continuously for at least a year, they're not otherwise ineligible, they can apply to adjust status in the US. But this kind of interweaves with these other kind of ironies, or maybe intended or unintended, I guess, problems with our immigration system. So many Cubans, I think starting under this administration, maybe the previous administration, I'm not sure, coming into the southern border. So let's say pre the Cuba parole, maybe they came into the southern border in some other status. Asylum seekers were given these I-220A forms. Those individuals, can't adjust status based
Right.
on the board decision that made that finding. If you're here with a parole, like the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaraguan parole, you have a parole document. You can adjust status. Your brethren who came over prior to parole, or even since this parole program was instituted, who had the misfortune to have been given arbitrarily by USCIS not a parole document.
Right.
CBP can issue a parole document at the border, even if you are entering, as an asylum seeker. Instead, they were given these I-220As, can't adjust status. It doesn't, it's one of those just arbitrary, ironic, frustrating, aspects of our immigration law. So yes, it's a big advantage if you're Cuban and you were admitted with under the Cuban, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela parole program, and you have been here at least a year, you are set up. I mean, you can apply for adjustment of status under the Cuban Adjustment Act and get a green card within some reasonable amount of time.
There's
So
so much wrapped up into that. I mean, first of all, the 220A thing, that's a very complicated issue, but that is on appeal to the 11th Circuit, the BIA's decision, which in many people's opinions had no rationale at all and logic. We'll see how that plays out. But so the Cubans have this special path because of the Cuban Adjustment Act, which, doesn't even require another basis other than being paroled. But even for your regular Nicaraguan, Haiti, or Venezuelan, the parole is necessary if they get another path to a green card, like a marriage. The parole is
right,
key
it
to
would
allow
help
them
them
to adjust.
to adjust status based
Yeah,
on a family relationship or possibly even an employment sponsored process.
right,
And remember, if you're Cuban, Haitian, or Venezuelan, you also may be eligible for TPS, which is still, in place. Don't know much longer it'll be in place if there is a new administration or change in administration from one party to another. But and it's not necessarily permanent. That has to be, extended, redesignated, and to qualify. But that is at least a potential longer term or indefinite option for Haitian nationals and Venezuelan nationals. Nicaraguans are probably in the worst position. There's no country specific, program. There's no TPS,
Right.
individuals from Nicaragua. And yeah, but as you said, yeah, if they find some other legal basis through family or employment, then yes, that parole does give them a very valuable advantage. It qualifies them to adjust status, at least meets that main element of adjustment of status of inspection and admission or parole.
So the parole program will not be extended for these four countries, Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans. But what about individuals from those four countries who have applications for parole pending and they're outside of America and they're still waiting for their parole application to be adjudicated?
To my knowledge, assuming they get the email, the notification on their cell phones from CBP and are able to board a flight before the program end date, they should be able to be admitted in parole status.
So we might be in a situation where the programs are not extended, but individuals with pending applications might still be able to benefit with their initial grant. Of course, we're not quite sure what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
my understanding is not that the immigration has all of a sudden said, we're not accepting more applications for parole. No, we're not accepting more um, applications from supporters.
Yeah.
That's not my understanding. My understanding is just they're not going to roll it over.
So the individuals who are here don't get another parole, but the individuals who have applications pending might be able to, I guess, come in and replace those
And
individuals.
get their 2 years of
Right.
parole. It's all going to be on a rolling basis. So depending on when you came in, when you got parole, is gonna determine when your status ends.
What do we think happens if Kamala Harris doesn't win the election with the parole program?
Well, there'll be a lot of litigation. I mean, I'm sure a Trump administration would do everything in its power to end the program sooner rather than later. But
It's a good
uh,
guess.
yeah, I don't think that ex post facto they'd be able to just terminate existing paroles. I would think, without having researched this, it'd be they might be an easier lift to say anyone who's not here already, the application is hereby, we're
Yeah.
not processing any more of them.
Yeah.
Or they could just take a more passive aggressive route and just, defund the program. Say,
Right.
okay, don't process these applications anymore. If you're outside the US, and too bad. It's
So
already
what's
taking months, more than 6 months, sometimes more than a year currently under the program to be admitted in parole status.
So what should Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans in America with parole that's about to not be extended do right now if they don't want to leave America and they want to somehow be here legally?
Well, if you're Cuban, I think the answer is pretty easy. You should apply for Cuban adjustment as soon as you've met the one continuous year of physical presence requirement, assuming you're otherwise eligible.
Right.
You're if you're in any of these, if you are in a nationality, Haiti or Venezuela or Cuba, where there's a TPS program and you qualify for TPS, apply for TPS. You can be here in a parole status and in a TPS status at the same time. There's no conflict necessarily. And if you're Nicaraguan, I mean, I assume there may be an option for an asylum filing. Maybe there are family-based petitions that could result in adjustment of status or employment-based processes.
Maybe there's employment based. I mean, these
Yeah,
individuals who've been here with parole, right? Like they have been here. They haven't violated 245C. They haven't
correct.
um
There's no unlawful presence issue. They may be able to adjust status here in an employment-based case.
yeah.
They may be able to concert process. So, you know, they may
Sounds
have
like they need to speak
that
to an attorney.
obviously that definitely that's harder. You've got to find a US company that wants to
Yeah.
sponsor you. The job market might be softening a little. It may not be that easy to get to that point, but
Yeah.
it's like a potential avenue for Nicaraguans.
Interesting stuff.
Mhm.
It is what you're saying. It's kind of the consequences of piecemeal immigration fixes instead of comprehensive reform, which also brings up parole in place. Another parole type issue floating around, different than the parole of these four countries' citizens. Parole in place, people already hear what is parole in place and what is going on with it.
Parole in place was meant to address the the situation of individuals who've been here for many years, who are married to US citizens, but who entered without inspection, who don't qualify under, for under 245I, who are not able to adjust status and who have this 10-year bar issue as well. So they're not able to adjust status because of the iwi. And in order to process for an immigrant visa outside the US, they need to first obtain a waiver of the 10-year bar. And I think the whole process is taking, what, 4 years? Getting the
Yeah, I mean that
I-30 approved,
just to get the
filing the
601A approved.
I-601A, getting that approved,
Yeah.
getting the interview at the consulate, then having to leave and coming back. And so the Biden administration, I thought pretty rationally, thought, well, that's just stupid. I mean, they're coming, they're going to be able, they're legalizing, they're getting their green cards. Why are we requiring all these legal gymnastics? The waiver, they have to leave, they have to come back, the expense, etc. And so they announced, I think it was in June, that this new program for parole in place, which is a concept that has already existed primarily in the situation we have immediate family members of military, active military in the US. They have been eligible for parole in place or to request parole in place for their immediate relatives for many years. So the idea is we'll give you the parole, even though you're here already, as long as you have been here at least 10 years and have been married to a US citizen as of June 17th, 2024, when they announced this, and meet other requirements. So that was immediately challenged in court by the state of Texas and 15 other, I guess, GOP-led states. And there was a temporary stay. You and I discussed it, the first Tetzeli talks. Temporary stay, not an injunction, but an administrative stay,
Right.
ordered by the district court. In the meantime, there's been a lot of activity. There was a motion to intervene filed by an immigrant advocacy group and some individuals who would have benefited from parole in place. Not too shockingly, the district court denied the motion, went up to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit affirmed the denial, and the case is basically back on track. So the temporary stay is back, the administrative stay is back in force, and there is going to be a hearing on a preliminary injunction November 5th, I believe. So we might get a decision on a permanent injunction, a denial of the motion for the injunction early next month. We'll see. They're
Right.
on an expedited briefing and discovery schedule. So we'll see. Obviously, if the administration changes from Democrat to Republican, then the US government won't be defending the lawsuit, and it'll be more of a foregone conclusion than it probably is at this point. And I guess it'll be a little more suspenseful for us if Harris becomes the next president. So
Right.
see.
So all these it seems that the Biden administration, now that we are in the waning weeks, 2 weeks really, of the Biden administration before they become lame duck, has been border enforcement and a couple of parole programs thrown to nationalities, Afghans, Ukrainians, the four groups and individuals who are spouses of US citizens. That's kind of been the legacy of the Biden administration to me, right? Kind of fixes around the
Yeah,
margins of border security.
that and a very confusing kind of whiplash back and forth on the asylum rules at
Yeah.
the port of entry. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's all been about the trying to thread this needle between, being welcoming and certainly more compassionate than the last administration, but at the same time, being realistic from the political perspective. And, there is a law enforcement aspect to this, trying to get a hold of what's going on at the border, even though I think a lot of it's out of their control. It's demographics, it's climate change, it's economic forces that are bigger than any of us and even bigger than the administration, but that's, I don't think they've successfully threaded that needle from the public perspective aspect. No, I think they had a very tough task and ask in managing this. But they're not helped by the fact that the Immigration Nationality Act is just so old and antiquated, and there's gridlock in Congress and no meaningful, reform it is possible at this point in time. So they do what they can, as other administrations have done. They just use regulations, executive orders,
Well,
and have this kind of ad hoc, way of addressing these problems.
the PIP thing seems, I am very sympathetic to that argument, Helena, but the PIP thing, however, does seem to be just legislation gone awry. The PIP problem, that is, the spouses of these U.S. citizens who enter the United States without authorization, who've been here a long time, who are great people, who are assets to society, who've never done anything wrong except coming to America unlawfully. The fact that they're stuck, have to go through this waiver process, pay all this money, wait all these years, show extreme hardship to get a green card. This was all intended by the 97 change, as you're very well aware. This was not the law, and they changed it, I guess, to disincentivize people from coming over unlawfully. It did not work.
It did
And now
not
we
work.
have and now we have a crisis.
Have more
601A
unlawful
applications. We
people
have
here.
people, I think if you ask 90% of Americans who won't agree on anything, they'd probably agree to that their neighbor next door has lived here 20 years and this marriage is a wonderful person. There isn't even an appetite to deport these people, but there's this sometimes impossible way for them to get authorization because of the change of law. And so the Biden administration created something like the PIP to try to address this situation that was created by Congress and Bill Clinton, who signed it, that just isn't working, but you don't have the legislative guts to fix what appears to be a statute gone wrong. Um, it's too bad, in my opinion, I suppose. But I think most of it is like immigration law is antiquated. It's not doing what it was supposed to do. In this case, I think this is a statute that's doing what it was intended to do. It's just not aligned with America's values.
Well, that's a bigger question because what are our values? I mean, I think it depends on who you talk to. I mean, we would like to think that, we're the America of the Statute of Liberty and you're humble, you're tired, you're poor. But I think we all know we're not. I mean,
But I don't think we are. And to be honest with you, when I submit my waiver applications, I'll even submit news articles from Mitch McConnell when he was Senate Majority Leader, when the Republicans had the Senate, about how America's values are still keeping families together. We might be a lot of things, but we're not a country. We promote family unity and the bearing of children.
we do, but we also put children in cages and, challenge these kinds of humanitarian programs like Parole in Place. And there are all sorts of other, weird aspects of the Immigration Nationality Act that are counterproductive, bad for the economy, and inhumane. Limiting the number of individuals who have extraordinary ability.
Yeah,
I'm here. Why? What's
right.
the reason for that? There's all sorts of irrational aspects of the law, and I think um, most of these are the only rational explanation is on some level some type of xenophobia or fear of too many people coming here from different parts of the world. And there's always been a tension. This is not the only century where the U.S. has had exclusionary laws and policies um, and xenophobic, you know,
I was against.
attitudes towards immigrants. I mean, it's not, but
I've been against letting in immigrants since the 1795, law against
no, the
anti
U.S.,
against
not you.
anti-French monarchs, anti-monarchs from France during the Revolution. I didn't want them here back then, and so I've been consistent since the late 18th century in that regard.
Why you?
Well, I mean, me and my, I don't know. I'm old. I've been
You're
around a
not
long
that
time.
old.
I'm just trying to say that I'm consistent. Doesn't matter where they're from. I've been since the days of before Napoleon.
Anti-monarchs and nobility.
No,
Oh,
pro-monarchs. I'm saying, like,
oh.
the French Revolution was very dangerous to America, and there was an anti-immigrant, I think,
The
feeling
French
even back then.
Revolution was not dangerous to America.
Oh yeah. I think the
Why?
French Well, because, it's one thing. I think once there's the whole Hamilton Jefferson argument, like it's one thing to allow the elites to overthrow the monarch from England and have a stable society, but what's going on in France when, Robespierre, who can never
No,
really pronounce his name, is cutting off heads.
I'm not a fan of the Reign of Terror. I'm just trying to understand
That's what I
why.
read. That's the best. There was an
Why?
anti-reign
And
of
I
terror
love
in.
Edmund Burke. I love Edmund Burke. Okay. But I do not understand why it was a threat to the United States. I mean, the US Revolution already happened. It was before the French Revolution and on some level probably influenced the French Revolution. But why was the French Revolution a threat to our republic?
I think that there was a fear of letting Trump. Well, you know what? Now we've gone way astray of what we were doing, but I do think
What other show, immigration show, are you gonna hear
we can
talk
talk
about
about French
French
Revolution. I think
Revolution?
that if you had polled Americans in 1790, they would have been against Reign of Terror supporters coming to America.
I agree, but that doesn't mean that the French Revolution or I'm not aware that, well, I don't think the French Revolution was a threat to the Republic. This is another little thread you just made me think of. Were there, French, I don't know, I don't think
Yeah, I
Robespierre, I
don't
think he
think
was
so. You
guillotined. I
gotta,
don't think he
you
tried to
gotta,
get asylum in the United
it was
States
only the
and
monarchists who were trying to
foment
come to
revolution
America.
here.
That's probably
Right,
right.
no, yeah,
No, it was a less than ideal analogy, but I
okay.
think but it does. Let me land this plane. It does bring us to the last thing I wanted to talk about, and there are still efforts for immigration reform in America today, no matter who wins. I mean, what is even going on with bills for immigration reform with candidates who support it?
And in
What's
terms of legislative weeds and I don't think there's anything right now that has a ghost of a chance of getting to the floor that you could want to qualify or just characterize as comprehensive immigration reform. There was a Dignity Act, which was a great bill, co-sponsored by a Republican and a Democrat, which is what I like to see because I think that's the only way we're going to get bipartisanship,
yeah,
a lot of bipartisanship is, and we don't have enough of that, is the only way we're ever going to see meaningful immigration reform. Which is why I contributed to someone from a party that I don't normally contribute to because they had shown they could be bipartisan and were pro-immigration. Um, and not everybody agrees with that, and I respect that. But I'm not optimistic about. I mean, even if we have another Democratic administration,
yeah.
I think this administration, if there's another Democratic administration, I think they now understand that politically they have to be less generous um, in terms of immigration policy, especially at the southern border. Um, and obviously, if we have a Republican administration, it, there's going to be bans, 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 and end of parole, end of TPS, lots of litigation. Who knows what other nightmarish scenarios we're going to have? But I'm not optimistic about immigration reform at the legislative level either. I don't, unless there's a huge sweep by Democrats and Republicans who are not against immigration and who have the guts, to vote for common sense legislation that, yeah, helps with border security, but also improves our entire immigration system and doesn't discourage, bringing in the best and the brightest, family reunification. Unless you have enough Republicans with that kind of those kinds of cojones, I don't see that happening either. It's it's
I,
it's almost like
I
this is fever dream we're in now when it comes to immigration. I mean, I think that's a bigger issue for people in the presidential election than the economy even. I don't know. That's what I'm
I
seeing.
hate to say it and even bring it you know, into the world. But I think it's pretty clear, I mean, as an immigration advocate, I think it's pretty clear that immigration is much more of a motivating force. Harsh immigration policies is more of a motivating force for Republican voters than is positive immigration policies is for Democrat voters. And
I
part
think
of
you're
me has been
right.
thinking recently, my goodness, if the Republicans take the presidency in one of the houses or even both houses, but of course not with a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. But if compromise has to happen, it actually is starting to seem more likely to me that a compromise is more likely to happen with giving a Trump administration these just draconian border policies that they can go red meat to their base and claim victory, spliced in with little unique bills that maybe address some of the long-standing problems that have been happening since like maybe the 3 or 10 year bar,
Yeah,
maybe
per
a parole
country
in place.
caps,
I've
based immigration. Yeah, maybe.
Right. Senator Murphy's got this little nuance,
Hmm.
get rid of matter of Lozada bar complaint bill that is, very wonky and I'm not hoping this happens, but it seems that it's just off the table with a Democrat president. But you can make me, I don't know. I'm not, maybe I'm naive, but maybe you can sneak in some little very specific bills, giving while giving up the ship on horrible policies if you're an immigration advocate. I don't know, but nothing else has worked. I don't even want this to work. It just seems, what do you think? I mean, is that even do you think that's even likely? Do you think that's a, like you said, fever dream? Or is it just, or we just forever in immigration reform purgatory?
Not forever, but I maybe 5 years from now, maybe two, I don't know. I don't see it right now. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that these kinds of kind of sentiments that kind of filter into the zeitgeist need time to filter out sometimes. And the pendulum swings a lot in this country. I mean, it just does. So, yeah, just like it did, after the Trump administration, I think there was I think the American public was just disgusted by some of what they saw, um, including again, children in cages being separated from their parents and other, the Muslim ban, um, and were maybe more receptive to more compassionate immigration policies. I think they were, but I hate to say it, I think it's been mishandled under the current administration, not intentionally necessarily, but you know, it's a complicated problem. I get that, but I think there were um, it could have been managed better. Delays in processing, um, delays in getting simple travel permits, like an advanced parole, work permits, Department of Labor delays and perms. I mean, these things that frustrate US companies and US citizens who are, in their own words, because I hear it all the time, I'm doing it legally. But everyone else is coming to the border and just waltzing in, even though we all know, you and I know that's not true, but that's the perception. And I
Yeah.
never heard that level of frustration with legal immigration, even under the Trump administration and
Well, maybe
in the
I
last
should
three
stop
years.
I
Yeah.
should stop watching Fox News, but your
I
point
don't
is
watch
well
that. These
taken.
are prospective clients.
No, no,
Yeah, 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 that we talk
the
to every day.
idea that people are walking across the border and
Oh
then they don't
yeah,
have to jump through
exactly.
hoops and they're getting all of these benefits is something that's peddled by certain media outlets, which is just
That
not
you're correct.
accurate, which we know. But you fight the conceptions that exist in the world and you try to change it and you keep advocating for truth, I suppose. Well, Helena, it is October 22nd. Didn't say that at the top. Next time we talk on Tetzeli Talks, we will know the direction our country is going
Mm.
on immigration and with many other things. So here's to hoping between you and I that we are not
And to
going
voting and to voting.
and to voting. Here's to hoping and to voting. Here's to hoping that we are not going back into 4 years of brutal fights on immigration and maybe onto a path of resolving some of these long simmering and long standing problems. But I'm sure we'll talk about that all next month.
Bye, Kevin.
Great talking to you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.